Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you for having me. The published title of my talk was this, apps in the academic world, are they the VHS or the Betamax? It was one of those bit of a mad day at work, and I got asked to come up with an abstract and a title quite quickly, and afterwards I just thought, that's probably not the best. It's a bit of a complicated analogy. There's probably a bunch of people in this room that don't even know what Betamax is or what. And so I'm just going to show my age. So really, what this talk about is this. This is an agency perspective. I work for Semantico, so we advise clients on digital strategy, and we deliver software applications. So really this talk is about, do apps represent an opportunity for the scholarly market, and even though it's in parentheses, it's a very important point, and can you actually make any money out of them? Before I continue, I just thought it would be interesting to see how many people in this room sort of firmly believe that there is an opportunity for you in kind of native application development. Okay, and to kind of get rid of the fence sitters, although fence sitting is a kind of valid strategy, how many people strongly don't believe that there is an opportunity here, so a kind of negative about apps? Okay, that's interesting. Let's see if so it'd be interesting to kind of take the same measure at the end of my 20 minutes. So this talk is going to be in two parts today. So the first thing is just a quick look at, is there an opportunity, and a way to kind of assess that is to have a very quick look at the numbers. I'm not going to dwell on stats. I think we've seen a reasonable amount already this morning. I'm just going to sort of zoom in on a couple. And I think very importantly, which is kind of what Will was alluding to as well, is what apps actually work best. So if we're going to get into the kind of the application market, if you like, then what lessons can we learn, and what can we kind of benchmark against? So that's the first part. Second part is kind of a quick look at, can you make any money? Obviously it's a big question, but one kind of metric about that is looking at what the kind of cost of reach is. So how much is it you're going to have to spend to get your application into somebody's pocket, if you like. Obviously that's not looking at conversion, so it's not looking at kind of what happens subsequent to that, so it's not looking at the idea of an app purchase or whatever. So it's kind of half the story, but I think it's still a useful metric. So if we just have a quick look at some stats, two there that, stats, there's lies, downlies and statistics, aren't there? There's many different ways that you can interpret statistics. These are two that I think we can interpret, in a good way if we're looking at the opportunities for application development. So we know that the younger audience particularly are very heavy users on mobile devices. And we also know that in the UK as well that the use of tablets is growing relatively exponentially. The first one there is really critical. We've got a potential client in the US that has a customer, and I was talking to them on the phone the other day, and this customer, 95% of their staff are due to retire in the next 5 years. So, the boomers are kind of going out the exit door, and what's replacing them are the kind of the Gen Yers, or the people that we refer to as digital natives. So, these sort of numbers are obviously quite important, and not particularly ambiguous. But you then get stats like this. So in the UK, Sky sites see more mobile accesses from apps than they do from mobile browsers. But in the UK, a much higher percentage of visitors to BBC websites actually get their content served to them through mobile browsers and not through apps. I mean, this may, obviously, there's any set of numbers, you can unpick them. There's lots of other kind of issues at work. It may be a demographic issue. It may be the fact that BBC websites or their apps are just not as good as Sky sites or whatever, but there's a reasonable amount of ambiguity in the numbers, and there's a lot of numbers, as I'm sure Mark can tell you. I just want to zoom in on two. Figure on the left is, in the last 12 months, that's the number of mobile accesses that we've served through our platform, so through our access management system that controls around about 300 publisher sites worldwide. Publishers like OUP, like McGraw-Hill, like CUP, so big publishers. Only 5% of the sessions that we've served in the 12-month period have been onto mobile devices. So 95% of usage is still tethered, basically. It's still laptop or PC based. Number on the right is the number of people that have downloaded an application to a mobile device and actually use it. How do we kind of interpret these two numbers? Well, your average planner, and I used to work as a planner, so I kind of know how their minds can work, will go, hold on a second, we can kind of pull these two things together, and we can say, well, you know, this figure is low on this side because you need to change channels, basically. There's a great opportunity to be serving content into the kind of the application channel, if you're not, and if you do that, then this figure on the left will increase. So we can make an assumption, or I'll make an assumption for the purposes of this talk, that does actually represent an opportunity. I mean, you can also look at it completely the other way around, of course, but such is the world of numbers. So if we say that, you know, from a planning perspective, if you like, there is an opportunity here, the next question to ask ourselves is what actually constitutes a successful application? So what type of apps tend to be most successful? I have a useful input on this from a friend of mine is a design director at Nokia Labs in Berlin, although kind of referencing Nokia at this stage may not be such a good idea because it's not really going to go down the tubes. But anyway, they obviously have a lot of experience in developing and delivering mobile applications within their ecosystem. Critical thing they talk about is the idea of the micro-experience. So what's a micro-experience? A micro-experience is some experience that doesn't overwhelm or perplex our customer. It's an experience that's relevant and it's small and it's crafted, it's beautifully formed. I think some of the things that Will was talking about constitute the micro-experience. If you just, I'll go into a kind of a recipe afterwards, if you like, about actually how you make one of these things. Obviously, micro-experiences are very valid and relevant to mobile devices, so iPads and the like, iPhones and the like. With the arrival of the iPad, then I think we need to look at the idea of the macro experience. And the macro experience is something that adds significant value and richness, and it's an experience that actually goes beyond the text. So you're augmenting the text with something, or you're generating meaning, or you're generating experience that kind of moves outside the context of the text. Somebody like me that's been around in digital haven't been in scholarly for that long, but I've worked in digital for 20 odd years, and ties back into a little bit what Mark was saying, I'm a little bit sceptical about the idea of rich applications on iPads. I've seen CD-ROMs, I've seen CDI, I've seen Laserdisc, I've seen companies like Attica Cybernetics and the First Information Group that were big businesses back in the 90s, multi-million pound businesses just crumble into dust, basically. And there's a little bit of, I think, of kind of wait and see about the relevance of producing a kind of macro experience, a rich interactive app on an iPad. So we've got limited time today, so what I thought I'd do is just, these are the kind of micro experiences that I think work, and I've purposefully chosen examples from outside of the sector because I think they kind of well illustrate the point. This one here is fantastic. I mean, this is my favourite application of all time. This one just shows me what time the next bus is coming from the bus stop that's nearest my house. Does one thing, does it really, really well. Really clear, I use it all the time. Next one is an app from Tools of Change last year in New York. That was a relatively good app, but again it was quite focused. It just told me what speakers were on next, where they were, a quick digest of what was happening over the course of the day. I also had some links out to social media, etc., but it was quite focused. The third one is my HSBC class balance application. That just tells me how much money I've got in my bank account. Doesn't give me any extra information than that, just does one thing, does it really well. Last one is my slightly unusual playlist from Spotify. Not many people can mix All I Can Fold with Richard Burton. That again just tells me what I've got on my Spotify account and what I can play. Just very focused, does one thing really well. When we're looking at macro experiences, then everybody knows about the Wasteland. Great app. I think it saw a return after 6 weeks or something like that. So very successful. Probably some sort of broader reasons behind that. A lot needs to do with the fact of the popularity and the kind of the knownness of the poem. And I think it kind of came out at exactly the right time to kind of hit it's very kind of zeitgeisty application. The whole thing is David Starkey there talking about kings and queens. So these are obviously outside of STM, but are kind of good examples of how people are trying to kind of augment content with additional functionality, additional features, additional richness that you can't necessarily deliver into a kind of micro experience on a phone. I don't really want to get into the bottom row. What I want to get into is the top row. So, as an agency, people come to us and say, okay, we've got an idea for an app. So what's the kind of the recipe that we use, or what's the sort of the advice that we give people on how do you kind of bake a micro experience? Really, really critical things. I strongly believe that you just do take one thing, really, really sharpen your proposition. Do one thing really, really well and fight one battle. I think that's the absolute, if you took away the subsequent 4 points I'm going to show you, I think that's the kind of the critical one. As part of that, then it's about reducing content. It's about the idea of glanceability. I mean, the bus application that I showed you just does one thing really, really well, and it enables me to see that it's done one thing really, really well. There's no additional information about the branding of Brighton buses or about us or any other kind of nonsense like that. It just does one thing really well, and the content has been reduced until it's glanceable. Third, fourth and fifth things are kind of more about process. So when you're building an app or thinking about an app, again, this is really important. I think you need to think small, so you architect from the ground up. I think there's a tendency to, if you imagine all of your kind of content as a forest of trees, there's a tendency to kind of chop all the trees down until there's kind of one left standing and go, that's the piece of content that we need to serve onto an app. I think really what you need to do is start off with more of a kind of green field really, and kind of plant one tree in the middle of it. So actually think about it from the bottom up and not from the top down. I'm sure we've all had experience of this, is push back. Resist the pressure to add more. Every business, every publisher, somebody at some point will say, if you're doing this app, can you put this in it? Can you put that in it? And there's this tendency for, not even in the world of mobile, just in the world of platform development as a whole, I think, to, if you're developing something, just to put more and more into it. So I think key part of the kind of recipe is the ability to kind of push back, to resist that pressure from within the business, to add more and to stay focused. Final part of the recipe is the idea of agility, and that's not necessarily talking about in the software development process. That's just about saying that you can get an app out there relatively quickly, and then it's on somebody's device, and then you can update it as you go. So it's the idea of developing iteratively, and over time you can update, you can change. You don't actually have to have the final thing that's going to last you for the next 2 years developed and finished before you actually deploy it. So that's a kind of generic recipe for a micro experience. It's worth focusing a little bit more about content really. So what works well in terms of if we think about the type of content sets that you guys are tending to be working with, then which of those kind of fit in to these top two things? So which kind of content sets lend themselves to being kind of reduced and sharpened and then kind of made glanceable? Stuff is truly location specific, I think, is obviously something that you can build a proposition around. I mean, we work with a company called Encyclopedia Catalana in Barcelona, and we're deploying a whole bunch of reference works with theirs online. One of theirs is something called Catalunya Romanica, and that's a very rich, very beautiful reference work, which is looking at all the kind of the architectural and archaeological heritage of the Catalan region. All of their data is geocoded, so every single reference in this 25 volume set, they're talking about a specific site, there's a geocode in there. We're not doing it for launch, but we're talking to them seriously about how we can then use that geocoding to produce a kind of focused, location-specific application or set of applications. So I mean from my experience of this industry, it's relatively rare that somebody will have that type of content and has already been geocoded and it's kind of sitting there ready to go. So it represents a really fantastic opportunity for them. So that's one thing that you can build a very strong proposition around. Obviously there's room in kind of abstract and indexing and kind of quick referencing. I think I characterise these by almost there being very little difference between the kind of the metadata and the data, I guess you'd say, is the obviously in an AI database. then the abstract is actually the thing that you're looking at, so it doesn't represent a piece of metadata about in that context, if you like, and also a quick reference, so dictionary lookup, etc., etc. So opportunities around that, and I think we're seeing some of those opportunities being played out. Cabby is a case in point. We work with them on the Cab Direct site, and there's definitely some movement there in terms of actually developing applications out of that. And also, I think what Will is talking about really as well is the idea of discovery and bookmarking the application as the kind of way into a broader content set. So basically that you can search locally on the application, and then you might be able to download a limited number of articles, but obviously what it's going to then do is potentially point you back to the main kind of content repository. So I think there's opportunities in those areas, but for a start, not everybody has that sort of content. I mean, certainly not everybody has kind of geocoded content that's kind of ready to go. So I think the opportunities are obviously down to the individual publisher and the individual content set. Before I go any further and look at sort of assess the relevance of those opportunities in terms of making any money, worth just having a quick time out. So we know that one interpretation of the numbers is there is potentially an opportunity for you guys to develop mobile applications or native apps. I think we can probably all agree that the recipe for success is the micro experience. I mean, I think it's a very solid piece of thinking, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think like I say, that some of the work that Will's doing may not articulate it in that way, but it's very much looking at taking kind of one aspect and actually building an experience around that. And I'm sure there's suitability of content by some of the kind of content owners in this room. So if we say, okay, that's all looking good, let's look at how we can actually measure the financial relevance or the financial impact of this. Sure, there's going to be a bunch of people here. It's always probably a bad idea to be presenting hard numbers. So this came from something that somebody had done on Mashable actually, so I just kind of replugged in a different set of numbers to it. But it's looking at the idea of cost of reach. So looking at the idea of, if you work out the reach of a channel and you work out how much it's going to cost you to get into that channel, then how many people can you reach per pound? So it's a good sort of metric of reach. And I know reach, like I said at the beginning, is only half the story, because you might have an incredibly high cost of reach, but actually the people that you're reaching are incredibly valuable and will go on and make purchases or whatever. So it's not looking at that side, which is a kind of harder side to measure, and it also there's a bunch of data there that I don't have access to. So if we're going to develop a single native app, then from an agency perspective, so from our perspective, you're looking at, it's a bit like a how long's a piece of string situation, but I'm sure Will can develop one for less money than this, but around about 15,000 seem to be in our experience, in order to do a decent job on it and deliver it and test it, is around about, is a good kind of rule of thumb, it's a good kind of finger in the air figure. If you look at the number of iPhones in people's pockets in the UK, and then look at how many people actually download apps onto those iPhones, you get a reach of 14.25%. So that reach, based on the smartphone ownership of 25 million, equates to a cost of people per pound of about 230 odd pounds. Hard to say whether that's good or bad, really, until you've got something to benchmark it against. If you then say, okay, I want to cover my three main kind of native bases, and this is again assuming that no code reuse, just to kind of illustrate the point really. So your cost of development potentially trebles. Certainly your cost of testing will treble. But you can half these cost numbers and rerun the sums again, and I think the story still comes out roughly the same. So if you're covering the three main bases, then the total reach of those smartphone operating systems in the UK is just over 40%. So that gives you a slightly reduced number of people per pound, just because your development costs have gone much, much higher. I know that's kind of quite extreme to say there's no code reuse at all, but when people come to us and talk to us about applications, it's just, like I say, it's an agency perspective, and we need to sort of, I'm purposefully putting them on the kind of the worst case scenario side, knowing what developing this kind of stuff can cost. Let's give it a comparison. Something called a web app, which again is what Will was talking to, is obviously the platform or the distribution of your content through the internet. So most people here will probably be distributing their content through the internet. You already will have a web app. It's called your content platform. It might have been provided, it might have been built by yourself. It might have been supplied to you by a company such as ourselves. If we're going to make that web app responsive, and I'll get on to what I mean by responsive in a minute, but to deliver content across as wide a set of devices as we possibly can, then you're looking at a increased production cost of around about the same number, actually about 15,000 quid, and that's about the additional cost at the front end of the process in terms of specifying, wireframing, deciding on the UX, deciding on the creative approach for deploying this content onto mobile devices or onto untethered devices. Again, it's a bit of a finger in the air figure. The great thing about web apps is that you've got to reach of 68%. So basically 68% of 25.5 million people regularly browse content through a browser on an untethered device, on a mobile device. So your reach has gone right up, basically, nearly 70%. Because of that, then obviously the amount of money you're paying to reach those people is vastly reduced. So you're suddenly hitting over 1,000 people for each pound that you spend, as opposed to 200 people for each pound that you spend. Now, like I say, this doesn't take into account conversion. So of those, say, 232 at the top right-hand corner, 200 of those might be incredibly high-value consumers, whereas of the thousands, then maybe 900 of them aren't. So it's only half a metric, but I think the point I'm trying to get across is that there is a way of deploying content into people's pockets onto tablet devices that doesn't need an application. And I would question, and I always do question, what it is that you can do through an application that you can't do through a carefully deployed solution off your existing web application. So that's the number that I'm interested in. That's how I worked it out. I'm not going to get into that. If anybody wants to know about it afterwards in more detail, then do come up and ask me. It's not that complicated, but I just wrote it down because I just knew that somebody probably would ask me. So what should you do? First thing you think is, hold on, I've already got a web app. I've got one of those. These are 3 examples of some of our applications. So the one on the left is our kind of new Y-level journals platform. The one in the middle is a site that we've got in beta at the moment for Encyclopedia.cat in Barcelona. And the one on the right is a site that we recently launched for McGraw-Hill called the Access Engineering Library. So web applications that are serving a lot of very rich and very detailed content, well tested, very well crafted. Most people will have something like that, I'm sure, in this room. How do you get from that most cost effectively to something that you can deliver onto mobile or tablets? You do this. You create a responsive solution. So if anybody doesn't really know what a responsive solution is, the philosophy behind responsive design is that you serve a single source of content laid out so as to be easy to read and navigate with a minimum of resizing, panning and scrolling on any device. So the great thing about responsive is that you're working off a single code base, working off a single content set, and you're delivering that with the use of HTML5 and CSS media queries to devices that sense the size of the viewport and will resize the content automatically and on the fly. And then in your specification phase, if you've worked out exactly how you want that content to look at 2 or 3 critical kind of screen sizes, so the usual ones obviously are taking just Apple, are how's it going to render on an iPhone, how's it going to render on an iPad, how's it going to render on a desktop device. You've basically got 3 kind of breakpoints, if you like. So as you resize the browser to fit those devices, the content rejigs and redesigns itself to serve up an experience that's appropriate to that device. But the important thing is that it's the same content set. You're not having to spend money on reimagining your content. You're not going to have to go through the process of saying, okay, what's a fantastic micro experience? I mean, it may be that those experiences and doing that is relevant to your kind of content, but the thrust of my opinion is that for the vast majority of you, it probably isn't. And at this stage, this is going to be something that actually kind of gets you into market, solves your kind of mobile conundrum, if you like. And then what you end up getting are these. So these are those three same sites in their kind of iPhone size, basically. So this one, the main navigation has folded itself up into a drop-down menu here. So we've got a featured article high up on the list. Similar approach with this one here. We've got the mobile navigation, changes position, changes shape according to the device. So it senses the device. So anybody's got a machine and you're connected to the internet now, have a look at Access Engineering Library. If you look at that on a laptop and then just drag the browser, you'll see that it breaks once and gives you the view that you'll see on an iPad, and then it breaks again to give you the view that you'll see on an iPhone. And obviously if you just access it from an iPhone, that's what you'll get. So it's responsive in terms of the fact that it senses how big a piece of real estate that you've got to work with, that it's being viewed on, and realigns itself accordingly. Obviously there's no kind of silver bullet with any of this stuff. In terms of kind of making decisions about that, what are the pros of responsive? I mean, from my perspective, one of the biggest pros is it's kind of low risk and high reach. I've talked about this internally as being something that I consider to be a kind of a defensive strategy, and I was told that that's possibly quite a negative way of describing it, but I think it is quite a defensive strategy, because it basically means that, as one of the other two speakers mentioned, you get to first base before you start worrying about applications and the rest of it. Is that you get to first base and you make sure that your content responds well and is served well onto mobile devices, basically, be they iPhones, iPads, or whatever. So I think it's somewhere that we should all go, and we can get there relatively quickly. It's got pretty comprehensive browser support, any browser that supports HTML5 and CSS media queries, so that pretty much covers everything other than IE8, which, you know, in the kind of mobile world, IE8 is only really running on Windows phones, and I haven't even brought Windows phones into the equation here. I mean, you know, maybe with the new partnership with Nokia, maybe suddenly something will happen with the Windows phone, but it's got pretty comprehensive browser support. IE8 will rapidly, I think, wither on the vine anyway. It's future-proof. Defensive, it's future-proof, depends which way you want to phrase it. And I think, again, really important thing, you're working from a single code base. You've just got one set of content updates, you've got one set of code maintenance to deal with. It's cost-effective. What are the cons? Well, I've spent a lot of time talking to you about the nature of a micro experience. It doesn't deliver that, really, because essentially it's not a specific content set. It's serving content in a way that is consumable on a mobile device, but it's not serving content that is specific to that mobile device. So for some scenarios, it may be that an application is still the way to go. It tends to front load the process, so there's a bit more thinking time that needs to be done when you're specifying how these layouts are going to work on these various different size viewports. But you know, any decent agency would take you through that process anyway, to some extent. But it does add some extra kind of weight around that. You know, it's network dependent, basically. So, you know, obviously if you're serving stuff through a browser, you need to be connected to the internet to see it. The large majority of apps, as Will mentioned, are wrappers anyway, so it's not very often you'll download an app and that has all of the content in it that you'll need to browse it entirely offline. There's going to be often cases where you need to connect back to the internet anyway. And also with the ubiquity of wireless, with the ubiquity of 3G, the notion of networked kind of being cut off from networks is actually, I think, something that will reduce and reduce and reduce. You know, pretty much anywhere you go now, I've got a 3G signal, or I've got often a choice of a 3G signal or a wireless network. You know, all you need data, tariffs. I think less of an issue. And you know, the final thing, which is also quite important, is it's not an application. So there's, you know, I'm sure there's pressure within a lot of publisher businesses that we need to do apps. We need to get apps out there. There's possibly somebody at the top of the business that's saying, "Oh, I've heard about apps. We need to deliver an app." It's not an app, so that could just be a kind of con in itself. To summarise, Is there an opportunity? This is where I start kind of moving back a bit and sitting back on the fence, isn't it? Probably is the answer to that, and that probably is if you've got the right content to deliver it. If you've got a content that you can craft a micro experience out of, then yes, there's an opportunity for developing an application. Can you make money? I think you can probably make money, or you can certainly get to the same market excuse me, a lot more cost effectively if you take a responsive design solution over a native application development solution. So my advice to our clients at the moment and to everybody in this room is, unless you have an absolutely compelling story to tell that you can tell in the form of a micro experience, then go responsive. Get your kind of ducks in a row first in terms of just delivering to mobile devices. You can iterate that, you can measure that, the quality of analytics we can get out of this stuff is obviously very high. You can start to see how people are using that. You can then start to work out whether there may be a market for actually developing a native app. Wait and see, which I know isn't exactly the most insightful thing to end with. The useful quote, as I was researching this, from David Bowen on the FT last month. The mobile website is where the corporate site was around 1997. Now, if anybody can remember that, that's not in a good place. No conventions, bickering about the way forward, and massive opportunities for experimentation, and lots more work for managers. And I haven't even mentioned apps. So I think that pretty much sums up where we are. So, the kind of closing point, I think, is to do the first thing well, get mobile first, then think about applications subsequently to that. And that's me. Thank you.